Professor Melanie Hildebrandt here at the University of West Georgia. This is the second part of 2 videos covering Unit 1 from our OpenStax text. So we're going to talk about some more important economic concepts, lay out some kind of foundational models that we will refer to as we advance through this course. So the first concept covered here in the second chapter is how individuals make choices. Remember, economics is the study of human decision making. So how do our individuals in our society make choices based on what we call their budget constraint? So the budget constraint is all possible consumption combinations that a person can afford given the price of the goods if they're spending all of their income. Okay, and so, if our income is $200 a week, then what are all the combinations of different goods and services that we could consume that week with our $200 budget? Okay, that's the basic idea of a budget constraint. The opportunity set then is all possible combinations of consumption that we could afford given those prices and our income. And here we're saying that you don't have to spend all of your income. You could save some. So that's really the difference here, okay? But given what the prices are, so we'll compare like 2 different goods and our budget, and we're going to be able to graph this budget constraint to show how we could make different decisions. So here's an example for Alfonso's consumption choice. He has a budget of $10. He could purchase burgers that are $2 each or bus tickets for 50 cents. And so you can see on our endpoints here, if Alfonso spends all of his $10 on burgers, then he would be able to purchase and consume 5 hamburgers. However, if he were to spend all of his $10 on bus tickets at point F, he could purchase 20 tickets for bus rides, okay? And so all of these combinations in between A all the way down to F show the combinations of burgers and bus tickets. That would be the total budget Alfonso has for the week of $10. We could calculate the slope of the line. So think back to your math classes, right? So slope is rise over run. And so here we could determine what we call the relative price of burgers and bus tickets by calculating the slope of the line. And for Alfonso's income limit here, if he gives up 1 burger, that's $2, right? He's able to then get 4 bus tickets. So that's what we mean when we say relative price. 1 burger costs him $2. Yes, that's the monetary price, but the relative price of that 1 burger is the 4 bus tickets that he can no longer purchase, okay? And so, again, that's related to the slope of the line. In terms of the opportunity set, remember, with that, we don't have to spend all of our money. So every point that's on the constraint, but also inside, so all of these, like a combination right here of 2 burgers and 8 tickets, I'll call it combination X, that is in the opportunity set. He wouldn't be spending all of his money, he would be saving some, but it is possible for him to consume that combination. Any point that is outside of the constraint, it's not possible to consume because he can't afford it, right? That's why it's called the budget constraint. And so let's say we were at 16 tickets and 4 burgers. So right here, point Y, that would not be possible for Alfonso. It's more money than he has in his weekly budget. Okay. Oh, let me zoom this out. All right, y'all. Sorry, guys. There we go. So this brings up a very important economic concept called opportunity cost. So what do people have to give up to obtain the other things that they want, okay? Think of it this way. The cost of something is the lost opportunity to use your resource in another way. The textbook definition, which you will see again, we define opportunity cost as the value of the next best alternative that we had to give up, okay? The next best alternative is the opportunity cost when we make decisions. And so again, economics, we're studying these decisions that people make. Well, the reality is that every choice has an opportunity cost. If I choose to spend an hour in my office, that is an hour that I'm not with my family. There was an opportunity cost. I had to give up something else. So back to our Alfonso example, his opportunity cost of a burger are those 4 tickets that he is not able to purchase because he spent $2 on the burger. So a lot of times we will refer to opportunity cost as the price, right? With Alfonso, we just said he spent $2 on the burger, so he lost those 4 tickets for the bus rides. Maybe your cousin buys a new bicycle for $300, so that $300 represents the amount of other consumption that they will now not be able to do because they purchased the bike. But sometimes measuring this opportunity cost in dollars may not capture the full or true opportunity cost of a decision, because cost of time should also be considered. Think of the act that you're doing right now, right? You guys are all attending college. You're taking this class for credit to work towards a college degree at some point. So yes, there are dollars being spent. The tuition that you pay, if you live on campus, the room and board, your $45 for Alta, right? You needed a new computer. So those are dollars that leave your budget that you actually spend, okay? But there's also hours that you're attending class, watching videos, doing assignments. And so you can't work your part-time job at Chick-fil-A or Target. You can't work during those hours because you are studying for your classes. So college has both those out-of-pocket costs, those actual dollars that you're spending because you went to college. But there's also the opportunity cost of lost wages. You're not working the hours that you're in class, and therefore you've given up the opportunity to earn your hourly wage. Some more important concepts here in our economics course, marginal analysis. So what are the benefits and what are the costs of choosing one more of a good or one unit less? So the idea marginal, think of that as like extra or incremental, okay? We'll talk about this a lot when we get to the firm's behavior. What is the marginal cost? What does it cost the firm to make one more hamburger, okay? Marginal, all right? Utility is probably a word that you've never thought of used in the way that we apply it in an economics lens. Usually when you guys think of utility, think of like functions or like, like your gas bill. People call those utility bills and stuff, right? But here in economics, we're defining utility as satisfaction or usefulness or the value that one acquires by consuming a good or a service. So what value does it bring? What satisfaction does it bring you? That's the item's utility for the individual. An economic law then that we have is called the law of diminishing marginal utility. And so as you receive more and more of a good, the extra or marginal utility value from each additional unit declines, right? And so you go to a pizza buffet, unlimited, you can eat as much as you want, and you're really hungry, and that first slice of pizza brings so much satisfaction. But with every slice you consume, your satisfaction declines, okay? That's the idea here behind law of diminishing marginal utility. Another concept we talk about in economics that's not always very popular when you're in committees making decisions is called sunk cost. A sunk cost is something you've already paid. So we say it was incurred in the past. That money you can't get it back. It's not like you can just resell the item that you purchased. Okay, think of it like a physical facility on campus, right? We built a football stadium. We can't 5 years later just be like, hey, who wants to purchase our football stadium? Because the answer would be no one. All right. So sunk costs can kind of be frustrating because people want to use them in making new decisions. So think about it. Here's an example. Our firm has done all this research and development. We've produced a new product, and it's just not doing as well as we hoped it would do. It's not selling. There's not enough demand for this product. But we want to stick with it, right? We want to keep producing it. We want to keep trying because we spent so much time and money in the creation and the launching of this new product. But the reality is you have to ignore the sunk cost. That's a past error. It's behind you now. And you need to make decisions based on the future. Looking forward, what is the best decision for me as an individual? What is the best decision for my firm? Sunk cost, they're basically irrelevant. And again, I promise you in a group setting, you saying that will upset people. But from an economic point of view, you are correct and they are not. Okay, so coming to our next model here in Unit 1, it's a very important one. Now we're going to look at the societal view of resource use and what is possible to produce. So we call this the Production Possibilities Frontier, or PPF, okay? And it's going to show different combinations of two products that our economy can produce given the resources that we have currently available. The slope of the line is going to show the idea of opportunity cost, right? What do I have to give up? So it's really similar to the budget constraint that we looked at like for Alfonso, except for that was just an individual making decisions based on his individual budget of $10 a week between two goods, burgers, and bus tickets. Now we're going to be looking at this for our entire economy. So here's a PPF showing a trade-off between devoting society's resources to healthcare or to education. So we have healthcare up here on the vertical axis and education down here on the horizontal. So if we put all of those extra resources into healthcare, then we would be at point A. Point B would be most resources going to healthcare. On the other end, at point D, most of our resources would go to education, whereas at point F, all of them would go to education. So as a society, we get to decide where we want to produce on this PPF between healthcare and education. Just like with Alfonso, we cannot produce combinations beyond the frontier. So something like this point here, point U, is not possible. Okay, it's not possible to produce that combination given our current resources. Everything on the frontier, so combinations A, B, C, D, F, and 100 others that are all in between A and F, those points, we describe them as two ways. One, they are attainable, okay? They are possible to produce. Two, they are efficient because we're using all of the resources that we have available. So notice the slope of this line is curved. And what that is representing is as we move from A towards F, the only way to get more education is to give up some spending on healthcare. Okay. And lastly, I want to mention points in the inside of the PPF, like point I. Those combinations are called inefficient because we often have idle resources. So we're not using all of the resources that are available to us. Look, when I go from B to C, I have to lose something, right? There's a trade-off, an opportunity cost. I give up healthcare to gain education. But I could move from I to C, have the same amount of education, yet get more health care, or I could move from I to D, gaining education without losing any health care. And that's why those combinations on the interior are called inefficient. So another thing that the shape of the PPF tells us is the law of diminishing returns. So just like you had the declining marginal utility for the pizza example, as we put more and more resources to producing another good, the marginal benefit, the extra value brought from those is going to steadily decline. Okay. And so again, it's the law of diminishing marginal utility was just a specific example of this law of diminishing returns. So again, the fact that the PPF is curved is showing as we add more resources to education, the gains are going to be large, but will eventually diminish. On contrast, if we go the opposite way, again, the original gains are pretty big, but then they will diminish as well. So again, our budget constraint and PPF models are very similar. Okay. They're both showing constraints where individuals or society have to operate. Again, the idea of scarcity, right? We have limited resources. They both show the trade-off. If I want one more of this, I have a cost. I have to give up more of the other, okay? Your differences, though, your budget constraint is going to have a constant slope because it's a straight line, whereas the PPF is curved, showing the diminishing marginal nature of the model. All right, so let's talk for a minute about these concepts, productive versus allocative efficiency. So productive efficiency means that it is not possible to produce more of one good or service without losing some of the other. So for our PPF model, when we are, here's our PPF, right? And we had healthcare, and then we had education, and let me get a different color. So, if we were here at combination B, remember I said that those combinations that are on the PPF are two things. We say they are attainable, okay, and they are efficient. And that's what I'm talking about now. Productive efficiency means it's not possible to get more health care without giving up education because I'm currently on the frontier. That's productive efficiency, okay? And that's what I was talking about earlier, how if we're inside that frontier, we are productively inefficient because we could produce more of one good without giving up the other. And so if I was at point I, right, I could move up to point B. I would gain this amount of healthcare and I would keep the same amount, the same level here. We'll call this 1, the same level of education. Or I could move and stay at 1 unit of healthcare, but I could gain some education. Inefficient production there at point I. Allocative efficiency is just the mix of goods that represents what society most desires, okay? My students will often ask, Professor, what does the PPF want us to produce? And I'm like, the PPF doesn't care whether we produce at point B or C, or even if we put all of our resources into healthcare at point A, or put all of our resources into education at point D. The PPF is indifferent between all of those. The PPF is only showing us what is possible to produce. It is highlighting productive efficiency. Okay, allocative efficiency is what society has to determine. What mix of healthcare and education have we determined is optimal for us? Okay, that's allocative efficiency. So again, looking at our PPF, again, all choices on the PPF like B, C, and D are productive efficiency. Okay, they display that for us. R, however, does not. It's inside the constraint or the curve. Therefore, not all resources are being used, right? We have, again, what we call idle resources. So what are we going to decide, right? How are we going to figure out what we produce? How are we going to figure out what we buy from other countries, maybe? This brings us to the idea of comparative advantage. So countries have different opportunity cost of producing things. It could be due to climate, right? A lot of coffee drinkers in the United States. Guess what? We don't really have. Most of the continental United States is not the best climate for growing coffee beans. Okay, so we import those in from other countries. So it could be based on different climates, different geography, technology, skills, right? Natural resources, okay? Those are going to determine the opportunity costs facing different countries in terms of production. So that brings us to this idea of comparative advantage. Comparative advantage exists when a country can produce at a lower opportunity cost than another country. So what we have to give up is less than what your country has to give up. So here we have two different PPFs. So here on the left, you have Brazil and their production of either sugarcane and wheat. And then on the right, we have the U.S. with those same two goods. Notice that the U.S.'s PPF is flatter than that of Brazil. This means that the opportunity cost of wheat in terms of sugarcane is lower in the United States than it is in Brazil. When we look at Brazil's PPF, we would see the opportunity cost of sugarcane is lower. So what does that mean? It means the U.S. has a comparative advantage in wheat, and Brazil has the comparative advantage in sugarcane. So from an economic standpoint, the United States should produce wheat because we can do it more cheaply. And not in terms of like dollars, but again, in relative money, in terms of giving up the other good. Brazil should produce sugarcane, and then we trade. We sell wheat to Brazil, Brazil sells sugarcane to us. And this is really how it works, you guys. The U.S. is one of the top producers of wheat. That's a true resource that we have. So the end of this chapter is going to talk some more about some policy things and some important concepts. So I'm just going to highlight a few. We talk about two different kinds, of economic statements, okay? Positive versus normative. So a positive economic statement, don't be fooled. It does not mean it's true. It's not like a true-false thing. It means, though, it can be tested against facts. We can look at data, right? When I say in the next chapter, law of demand, the reason it's called an economic law is that we have data from all these markets that prove that as price goes up, quantity demanded of that good by consumers will go down. And that's why it's an economic law, because it's held true over time. We can test it, okay, against the facts. A normative statement are simply someone's opinion, and those cannot be tested. And there's going to be different opinions for different individuals in our society. So there is a difference between statements of fact and statements of opinion, and that should be taken into account when we have elected officials who are creating new policies that are going to have an economic impact. I don't know about you guys, but I would like for our elected officials to make these new policies based on statements of fact, positive economic statements, and not the normative opinions where everyone's are different. As I mentioned earlier, important to note that a positive statement can be incorrect, i.e. a false statement. However, a positive statement, it's positive in that it can be proven to be true or proven to be false using data and evidence that we have. So we define a positive statement as an economic claim that attempts to describe how the world actually is or how the world actually functions. And on the other side, we have the normative statements, a claim that attempts to assess the desirability of how the world is or functions, perhaps with suggestions of things that could be done to improve. Again, people's opinions. So let's evaluate some statements here. A positive statement is fact-based. It provides an observation or prediction, and it can either be confirmed or refuted by evidence. Whereas normative statements are opinion-based. They express someone's desirability of how the world should be, and they involve judgment, value judgments, or priorities. You'll often know it's a normative statement when you see words like ought to, should, I think, right? So, positive or normative. The government should increase the minimum wage to help poor people. So see, that's your key word, should. That's telling me this is a normative statement. Cutting taxes is the only way to spur positive economic growth. So think about that one for a minute. I don't see the word should or ought to, but anything that's also a statement that says this is the only way it can be done. That's, once again, someone's opinion. That is a normative statement. A few more things wrapping up this chapter. Again, going back to Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, he talked about this invisible hand. Okay, the idea here is that individuals acting in their own best self-interest will actually lead to the best positive social outcomes for everyone involved. Consumers will encourage businesses to offer goods and services that meet their own needs, right? If they make something we don't want, we don't buy it, that's a signal to the firm, there's no demand for this, you shouldn't make it anymore. Note that self-interest in economics does not imply that self-interest in all aspects of life is a good thing. But his fundamental argument was if both firms and consumers are making decisions based on their own best self-interest, it will end up being the best for everyone. There are limitations to that, which is why we do have central authorities or governments that provide resources that firms otherwise would not. We'll talk about that more later in this class. That is a wrap on the first unit of the course. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. And again, you need to be doing your work in Newton Alta, okay?